like to introduce Tom Styczinski, and he'll repeat that if I didn't get it right, who works in the financial industry. He also buys and sells coins at local trade shows through his small business, Tom the Coin Guy, LLC. He is a longtime coin appraiser for the Milwaukee Public Television's annual appraisal fair, and I'll be happy to send you this bio afterwards as well. He has a passion for rare coins and is a consumer advocate in the coin industry. He is also a founder of the Numismatist United Legal Defense organization. He is going to start us off by explaining the origin of the Minnesota bullion coin dealer law and why it hurts consumers and why this lawsuit is necessary. And this, as another footnote, for anyone who watches this now or afterwards, my phone number is 312-422-1333, and my email is tc, like Topcat, @tcpr.net. And I'll put that in the comments as well in case anyone watching it now or later needs further information. So Tom, please go ahead.
Thank you, Tom, for that introduction. And I'd like to start out by explaining kind of the origins of the law. And it started in 2012, and there was quite a bit of problems in the state of Minnesota with unscrupulous coin dealers. We were one of the main places where large telemarketers operated, and we had some of the biggest telemarketers in the country. And unfortunately, the telemarketers didn't always have the best reputations. They would often specifically go after the elderly and try to take advantage of them and sell overpriced coins to them. And they would have like their lists of people of their contact lists. And sometimes the employees, when they left the company, would take the list with them. And that happened, and it went, and the people that stole the list were actually even more unscrupulous than the telemarketers were. And they started really taking advantage of them and not delivering product and basically committing all-out fraud. So what happened then was the Minnesota Attorney General teamed up with the original telemarketer and crafted a law. The problem was they looked at it from a perspective of the big telemarketers, and they didn't look at it from the whole industry, and they didn't look at the little guys. So what ended up happening was they ended up crafting legislation that would take advantage of the regulation requirements and push smaller people out of business. And what they would do is, so basically what they did is, and it was very poorly written law. It was very ambiguous, hard to understand what was in it. And the big telemarketers would use that because they had large legal teams that could easily defend against it. And then the Department of Commerce would take advantage of that by specifically targeting legitimate coin dealers. They would go to the coin dealers and they would say, we think you're doing this. You need to pay us a fine, or else we're going to commence legal action against you. Now, the other coin dealers would probably talk to their lawyers, and their lawyers would tell them, well, it's not, you may be absolutely right, but it's not worth it for you to challenge it. And in this way, the Department of Commerce would use it to extort the smaller coin dealers. So it was really, and one of the things that they would do is they would say, hey, you can either register with us, or you can, or you can stop doing business in Minnesota, which would also further the objectives of the large telemarketers, because it would narrow the amount of business competition that they would have. So the law maybe started out as trying to be consumer protection, but as a result, what happened was it got into the wrong hands, and it became consumer, allow them to take advantage of the consumer. So what I'd like to do now is introduce my lawyer, Eric Cardall, who's got a lot of experience taking on and representing the little guy against some of the larger industry players. And he's going to explain our lawsuit, what our legal bases are, and why we, hope to prevail. So, Eric?
Thanks, Tom. Tom. So today, Tom's right. We filed a lawsuit in U.S. District Court, filed in federal court, on behalf of small business investors and coin enthusiasts. And they're suing the Department of Commerce, Grace Arnold, the Commissioner of the Department of Commerce, because they've criminalized small business investors and coin enthusiasts pursuing their business, investment, and hobby pursuits. So it's crazy, absolutely crazy. It's the result of what I would call Minnesota's economic illiteracy. Minnesota State Legislature and the Department of Commerce don't know how to read anymore. They don't understand how the economy works. They don't know how to write laws. It's really just atrocious. I mean, it's just a mess. The current Minnesota law makes it illegal to purchase or sell a combined annual total of over $25,000 in gold, silver, or other precious metals without registering as a dealer and posting a surety bond. Nowhere else in the whole United States, in the world, is that required. But Minnesota uniquely, I learned a new word this week, sui generis, the one place that's different, we do this. We require people who not only are going to hold the coins, but who invest in like gold or silver indexes, right? You make an investment in metals, you have to also register and post a surety bond. The lawsuit is basically against Minnesota's bullion dealer law. We're arguing it's unconstitutional and an impediment to interstate commerce. We won't get into all the details of the complaint because there are many problems with this law, but basically coin collectors and investors are being discriminated against compared to out-of-state dealers. And out-of-state dealers don't want to work in Minnesota anymore because of these laws. These laws are so awful that the Numismatic News has referred to Minnesota's laws as draconian. They're draconian. Why would Minnesota look at every person's investment, that is coins, precious metals, gold, bars, rounds, ingots? Why would you look at every person's investment? That's the investment that every person wants to do because they don't want to invest in bank or stocks as some sort of evil that's regulated in some way that no other asset is, like art, stamps, sports cards, or other collectibles. Or even investments, like I said. I mean, no other investment requires, when you hit $25,000 aggregate annual transactions, for you to register and file a surety bond. So let's look more closely at how it affects every person in Minnesota and how every person in Minnesota who invests in precious metals, that is, like I said, investments in silver or gold, it could be other precious metals, could be coins, rounds, bars, ingots, anything that you have to register and post a surety bond, meet all sorts of other requirements. Now, this even applies to U.S. mint coins. Can you believe that? I mean, a U.S. mint coin, the silver eagles, the gold eagles, that's money. I mean, you're basically, it's like you're saying that someone who holds money, U.S. mint issued money, has to register and have a surety bond. Most ancient coin dealers now simply won't sell their coins to Minnesotans anymore. Why would you? Would any dealer, anyone who's selling an ancient coin, want to induce a Minnesotan to commit a crime because they won't register and post a surety bond to own even a single ancient coin? So the law passed in 2013. It's all sorts of different requirements. But the thing that's important for everyone to understand, that Minnesota is regulating bullion investors, the investment in bullion, the ownership of precious metals, coins, in rounds and bars and ingots in such a way that no one's doing it. so one of my clients, Treasure Coin Island, they're an out-of-state dealer, and they won't even do business in Minnesota. But that's not, now that's the standard in Minnesota, is out-of-state dealers won't do business here. It's not so much that they have to register. The problem is the clients have to register. And you have to understand the consequences of Minnesota's economic illiteracy here. A better law could have been written by a fifth grader. That is, if you're going to regulate coins and the sale and purchase of coins and rounds and bars and ingots, you have to be very precise about who you're regulating. And you want to avoid including consumers and investors. Because when you include consumers and investors under some sort of threshold, like $25,000 in aggregate of annual transactions, you're including virtually everybody. And you know, there's been enforcement action in Minnesota where they even have gone after an IRA, individual retirement account holder, for transfers within their IRA account. And that's federally regulated. And so here you have the state sticking its big nose into something on the basis of economic illiteracy. And the result is Minnesota state legislature uniquely has isolated Minnesotans from a huge market. You know, coins and precious metals and these bars and ingots and rounds, they're a market. People buy this instead of stocks. They buy this instead of real estate. They buy this instead of putting their money in the bank. And in Minnesota, out-of-state dealers won't do any more business here. Fortunately, the US Constitution has a commerce clause that requires the states not to substantially burden interstate commerce without a compelling purpose. And here there's no purpose. I mean, even the folks that Tom Styczinski was mentioning had committed fraud through telemarketing. Guess what laws they were convicted under? The pre-existing telemarketing fraud laws. You didn't need to regulate the coin industry in this way in order to prevent fraud, because you already had the old fraud laws, which were already sufficient to convict those telemarketers. So I think that this is the result of, you know, sort of maybe some do-gooders, but it got in this path where we don't have people at the Department of Commerce and the people within the state legislature who know how to read. They don't know how to read simple texts about economics. They don't understand economics. They don't understand regulation. You know, I wouldn't trust my checkbook with these people, would you? And so they come up with this idea that, oh, if anyone in Minnesota does precious metal transactions over 25,000 aggregate in a year, you have to register and post a surety bond. But, you know, the whole community of dealers out of state have said, this is draconian, it's wrong. I'm not going to do business in Minnesota because I'm not to induce Minnesota clients to commit crimes. Again, it's not about the people being regulated. They're fine with registering. They're in the business, but they don't want to induce their clients to commit crimes because the customers can't believe, and who would, that when they make an investment of $25,000 in precious metals in any of the forms I've mentioned, that they have to register as a dealer, post a surety bond in order to avoid the crime. So this is incredibly onerous. Like I said, it's sui generis. Minnesota, you know, is supposed to be a special place, but I guess it's a special place for criminalizing Minnesota consumers in this instance. So we're very excited about the lawsuit. We think we're doing some good. This is the type of lawsuit that if I go out in the street, you know, 95 out of 100 people agree with me, and the other 5 probably work for the Department of Commerce or are in the state legislature, and they don't want to admit they made a mistake. But in Minnesota, our government never admits to making a mistake, even when we file a lawsuit pointing out an obvious mistake. So we'll file the lawsuit and we'll have to fight the Department of Commerce to get rid of this obviously draconian law, and we're happy to do it. So we don't have the judge's name yet, but we filed the complaint and we'll be following the ordinary course to pursue this, if necessary, through trial. It'll likely get resolved on a summary judgment motion. I want to thank Tom and Treasure Island Coins and the Numismatist United Legal Defense, which is a new group formed to defend the rights of people in the industry and consumers and hobbyists as well. So with that, I'll hand it over to Tom Zelka to handle the questions, I guess.
Yeah, thank you so much, Eric. I don't know, Guy or David, do you have any questions for Tom or Eric?
I'm good, Tom. Like we talked about, you know, we since 2014 we had worked closely with the Department of Commerce to try to make this law more palatable for our dealers. And as you aptly pointed out, unfortunately, the majority of the dealers across the country made the decision not to even do business with any of the people within the state of Minnesota interested in buying gold or silver coins or rare coins for that matter. So we're very familiar with it. We're here to help in any way that we can. If you just, we'll be happy to provide you with our historical information of everything that we've done prior to, if you think that will be beneficial or helpful to you, Eric, you know, in your efforts. And then we'll be happy to communicate this information out to our membership and hopefully, you know, get more support for your initiative moving forward.
Yeah, we've got a question from WCCO TV, and the question is, to be clear, if I go to an online bullion dealer like JM Bullion as a private individual and spend more than $25,000 in a year, I need a surety bond. And that's absolutely correct. That in Minnesota, if you invest $25,000 through your IRA or an online bullion transaction like described in the question, that you would have to register as a dealer and post a surety bond. And this has been made clear over and over again, you know, in many cases. And, you know, Tom went through about a couple of years of, maybe 3 years of litigation with the department. And the department made it very clear, as I represented Tom and his company, Tom the Coin Guy, that they were requiring $25,000. It didn't requiring registration on $25,000 purchases. It didn't matter if you were a big dealer, a little dealer, a guy who goes to trade shows, or just an investor or a consumer. Plus, they have enforcement actions that they've been implementing against basically dealer investors as well, including one regarding an IRA account. Tom, do you have any comments on that?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, absolutely. And I think a lot of the problem is just how they wrote the law. I don't know if they intended on covering consumers, but they certainly did by just the pure ambiguity of the way it was written. It's really terrible legislation, and you know, they're kind of abusing it and using it to intimidate anyone that disagrees with them, or just trying to intimidate it to increase their budget with fines. It's not really a pretty situation out there.
Right. So it's interesting though, on a point about the Tom's raising about the ambiguity in law. It hasn't been ambiguous with respect to the out-of-state dealers. They know they can't do business in Minnesota because they'd be inducing their customers to commit these crimes. But the one thing about this type of lawsuit I found in Minnesota is that there's so much illiteracy in our government, and they make these mistakes that it's really just a fool's errand to determine whether they've done this because they're menacing or it's just a mess. Professor Carl Llewellyn had a quote, University of Chicago Law School professor: "Ideals without technique is a mess. Technique without ideals is a menace." So it's not really our job to figure out whether Minnesota is just a mess or it's a menace to its people. Rather, our job is to go into court and show that the consequence of this law is causes an unconstitutional substantial burden on interstate commerce without a compelling state interest. So, you know, it doesn't matter, you know, in a sense, did the kid try to fail the test, or did the kid fail the test because he didn't study, right? It doesn't matter, you get an F. So the state legislature and the Department of Commerce get an F in this subject area. You know, we took a look at it and we said, well, look, I mean, if none of the out-of-state dealers will do business in Minnesota, well, that's a test. I mean, they don't want to induce their customers to commit crimes. Who would? I mean, it's just like, you know, you're a registered dealer, but you don't want to do business in Minnesota because you sell over 25,000. Automatically, it's a crime if your customer isn't registered. But, you know, if let's say you sell 1,000, well, wouldn't you feel guilty if you put them over the 25,000 annual aggregate? And so you just don't do any business in Minnesota. You don't even want to do less than 25,000. And, like I mentioned, the rare coin dealers, the ancient coin dealers, nothing. And so why would Minnesota, Minnesota has a reputation, amongst some that's a place you can't have any fun. And here you can't even like have a hobby of investing, selling, and purchasing precious metals without register, posting a surety bond, inviting all this government regulation. I mean, all right, so we can't do this, this, and this, and now we can't buy and sell U.S. mint coins. I mean, you can't even have a bunch of gold eagles and silver eagles around without having to register. And so, I don't know, Tom, it's pretty discouraging, but you've been living with it for a long time, haven't you?
Yeah, I mean, it's just been a terrible situation. And you had mentioned the ancient coins, and I want to talk a little bit about, some of the consequences that can happen when you don't understand the industry that you're regulating. They put a receipt requirement in the law that said you must say how many grams of precious metals are in the coin that you're selling. And you have to write that on a receipt, and you have to give it to the customer. And if you don't do that, you have to pay $10,000 in a fine. Now, the big problem is they don't understand ancient coins, because in ancient coins, we don't know the percentage of gold in it, which means there's no way for a coin dealer in ancient coins to know how much gold's in it. They don't know what to put on the receipt, so they cannot legally follow the law. There's just no way to do it, because the information that they're asking for is lost to antiquity. They don't know, and they can't find it out without destroying the coin. So they've essentially made it illegal to do any ancient coins that contain gold or silver in Minnesota. So that's a prime example of just how people not knowing what they're doing can make things worse for the consumer.
Yeah, it's interesting, Tom, that you had offered all that advice in the legislative process to make this law better, and that you presented yourself as an expert based on your experience, and that the state legislature and the Department of Commerce wouldn't listen to a lay expert like yourself. And really, from my point of view, it was the Attorney General's office that was dominating the legislative process. Oh, we got to stop fraud. We got to stop fraud. But the legislature and the Department of Commerce wouldn't slow down and listen to a gentleman like yourself, who was clearly an expert and who was making himself available to make the law better. And, in the olden world, maybe 40, 50 years ago, people would have listened. But I think that the Department of Commerce is kind of succumbed by its own expertise, its own elitism. So what would Tom, the coin guy, know about coins when actually, Tom, it's self-evident, you know a lot more about the industry than the Department of Commerce does.
Yeah, I mean, it is really frustrating dealing with that whole process. I mean, one of the things that I wanted to put across to them is that we have the same objectives. I mean, I'm a small-time business person. I do coin shows on the weekend for fun. I do it because I have a passion in the industry. I have a passion for coins, and I love it. And one of the things that I just cannot stand is when someone takes advantage of someone that maybe has that same passion I have about coins, but maybe they don't have the knowledge, and then someone takes advantage of them. I just hate that. So I would have been more than happy to assist in fixing this issue. And I think a lot of it would come down to enforcing existing fraud laws, because, like Eric said before, the people that inspired this law violated federal law, and they had listed like every coin dealer that all the crooks in one of their press releases. And if you go back and look, almost all of them ended up in federal prison. So it wasn't something that this law helped. This law made things worse. And all they needed to do was enforce existing law. And it's just frustrating sometimes dealing with, the legislative process.
Yeah, sometimes Minnesota presents itself as like being especially literate. and it's not the case. And this is a good example. Like, this is an example of how you don't legislate. You don't want to, like Minnesota, if it were literate, to present examples of how to legislate. But here, imagine if the Minnesota State Legislature dealt with other areas of the economy and used the same approach. So let's say there was someone who committed fraud with respect to brokering stocks. That happens occasionally, right? And so what they do is they say, okay, anyone who does an annual aggregate of $25,000 of purchase and sale of stocks has to register as a broker and post a surety bond. Well, then all the out-of-state brokers would say, we're not doing business in Minnesota because it would be a crime for our customers to purchase an aggregate of $25,000 of stocks or bonds. And so the point being that, Minnesota is going in the reverse. We're setting a negative example for the rest of the country on how to legislate. And what we want in Minnesota is basically for our government to be literate and be able to read and understand how the economy works. And so when they do these things that are so illiterate, so like, why are you hurting the people? You just kind of say, wow, Minnesota's off. I mean, we're so off. And Tom, what I appreciate about your case was that you had really worked hard to improve the law. Mm-hmm. And then after you improved the law, they sued you, right?
Well, I mean, I tried to get them to improve the law. I even some of the things that are in our brief saying this is unconstitutional for doing this, I told them in the legislative process. I said this is not going to stand up. And the thanks I got was after the legislative process ended, they came after me. They basically didn't have a leg to stand on, but they knew it'd cost me a lot in legal fees in order to defend myself. And then I actually won a state court injunction against them. And then after that, they just pretty much dropped it. So, it's they're again just abusing the legislative process. I don't know if it's arrogance or what, but I was there willing to help them. And I guess that's the thanks you get.
Tom and Eric, why don't we, I know we're kind of at the half-hour mark, and I thank you, Guy, for hanging out. I know this is something that you're familiar with. Why don't we wrap this up? And as I mentioned earlier, and I put it in the comments, but my email is tc, like Topcat, at tcpr.net. If anybody needs further information, or you can call me at 312-422-1333. And thank you for joining us today.